The last thing the HOA meeting secretary wrote before bolting was subject: fence height violation at parcel 14C-0 Doyle Ranch ellipsis. Then the walls shook. Outside, 200 thundering, snorting, grass-fueled bison stormed the Maplewood Hills HOA office, led by an aggressive bull named Chairman Moo. The stampede trampled landscaping, shattered the Covenant Compliance Hall, and left behind a carpet of hoofprints and dung. In the security footage, you can see Karen Del Vecchio, president, enforcer, terror of every tulip bed, sprinting out the back door in orthopedic wedges, screaming with pure panic in her voice, "Why are there horns coming through the wall?" Let me back up and explain how we got here. My name is Brady O'Doyle, and I'm a sixth-generation rancher who owned the last surviving plot of open land bordering the newly erected nightmare of beige called Maplewood Hills Estates. For decades, my family had worked this land, raising cattle, then switching to bison in the 90s when the market shifted. We minded our business, mended our fences, and raised our bison quietly, without bothering a soul. The nearest neighbor used to be 3 miles away, and that's how we liked it. But progress has a way of creeping up on you like a snake in tall grass. When Maplewood Hills Estates went up 2 years ago, I figured we could coexist peacefully. Sure, the cookie-cutter houses with their perfect lawns looked out of place next to my weathered barns and grazing fields, but I wasn't one to judge. Live and let live, that's what my grandfather always said. Until the HOA formed. Until Karen Del Vecchio decided that the pastoral charm of a working ranch was, and I quote from the letter she sent me, detrimental to the modern aesthetic of suburban tranquility. Her first act as HOA president was declaring my perimeter fence non-compliant with HOA visual standards. Now, mind you, this fence had been standing for 40 years, built by my father with his own 2 hands using cedar posts and steel wire. It wasn't pretty, but it did its job keeping 200 head of bison from wandering into places they shouldn't be. Karen didn't care about function, though. She cared about form, and apparently my fence didn't match the approved color palette of warm taupe and desert sand. Her second act was hiring contractors to remove it without my consent. I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sun was barely up, steam rising off my coffee mug as I stood on the porch, when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery. At first, I thought maybe the county was finally fixing that pothole on Ranch Road, but then I saw the excavator heading straight for my southern fence line. I woke up properly to find half my southern fence flattened and 3 HOA goons admiring their work like they'd won a landscaping award. The lead contractor, a smug little man with a clipboard and a hard hat that looked like it had never seen real work, turned to me with a smile that made me want to introduce his face to my breakfast plate. "You're welcome," he sneered with the kind of confidence only someone who's never been charged by a bison could have. "The HOA voted unanimously that your fence was ruining the neighborhood's resale value." I stood there in my flannel and boots, watching them load pieces of my father's fence onto their truck like it was garbage. Every instinct told me to grab my shotgun, but 30 years of dealing with difficult neighbors had taught me patience. I simply nodded, keeping my voice steady despite the anger boiling in my chest, and said I'll handle the repairs. What I didn't mention was that the damaged fence had held back a 200-head herd of ornery, easily agitated bison who were particularly protective of their territory. And here's the kicker that these suburban warriors didn't know. The HOA office, that gleaming monument to bureaucratic overreach, was built on what used to be their favorite grazing spot. Every morning for years, my bison would migrate to that exact patch of land to feed on the sweet grass that grew near the creek. When the developers bought that parcel and paved it over, my herd had to be retrained to avoid it. They weren't happy about it then, and given the chance, I had a feeling they'd love to reclaim their old stomping grounds. I spent the next week playing the part of the defeated rancher. I replaced the fence, making sure everyone saw me doing it. I even used the approved desert sand-colored paint on the posts, though it looked ridiculous against the prairie grass. Karen drove by 3 times that week in her white Lexus SUV, slowing down each time to inspect my work with a satisfied smirk. She even had the audacity to wave at me once, a little pageant queen wave that made my teeth grind. But while I was making a show of compliance during the day, I was preparing something special at night. See, bison aren't like cattle. They're smart, they remember, and they can be trained with the right incentives. Using a mix of trail feed, cowbell training that my grandfather had taught me, and pure vengeance as motivation, I developed a plan that would make those HOA bylaws look like toilet paper. The moonless night I chose for my operation was perfect. No wind, no clouds, just darkness and opportunity. I quietly opened the temporary fence I'd installed, then used the same beat-up ranch truck the HOA once threatened to fine me for parking too ruggedly in my own driveway. The irony wasn't lost on me as I started the engine and began the slow process of leading my herd toward their destination. Chairman Moo, my lead bull and the undisputed king of the herd, knew something special was happening. He'd been agitated ever since the fence incident, pawing at the ground and snorting whenever he looked toward the HOA office. As I scattered feed leading from the pasture toward Maplewood Hills, he took point position, his massive head swaying with each step. The rest of the herd followed, their hooves creating a rhythm that sounded like distant thunder. I led them on a slow roll straight into the heart of Maplewood Hills, past the identical houses with their perfect lawns and approved mailboxes. A few motion sensor lights clicked on as we passed, but at 3 a.m, nobody was awake to investigate. The procession moved like a force of nature, unstoppable and purposeful, toward the building that represented everything wrong with suburban expansion into ranch country. Inside the HOA headquarters, unknown to us at the time but revealed later by security footage, Karen was actually there, pulling an all-nighter to prepare citations for the upcoming week. She was mid-sentence about someone's mailbox font being a quarter-inch too large when the stampede hit. The first indication something was wrong was the gentle vibration of her coffee mug on the desk. Then came the sound, a low rumble that grew into a roar. The damage was biblical in proportion. Desks were overturned like dominoes, their contents scattered across the floor and trampled into unrecognizable pulp. HOA bylaws, those sacred documents that governed everything from grass height to approved holiday decorations, were shredded and eaten by hungry bison who found them surprisingly digestible. The covenant compliance files, 20 years of violations meticulously documented, became expensive confetti. A life-sized cutout of Karen holding a citation sign, which she'd had made for the HOA's 5th anniversary celebration, was gored clean in half by Chairman Moo himself. The bull seemed to take particular offense to the cardboard Karen's smiling face, returning several times to ensure it was properly destroyed. The conference room table, imported mahogany that Karen had insisted was essential for proper board meetings, was reduced to splinters. The security system captured it all in high-definition glory. Karen's face when she realized what was happening was a masterpiece of human emotion transitioning from confusion to recognition to absolute terror in about 3 seconds. She tried to call 911, but dropped her phone when a young bull crashed through the window near her desk. Her escape route cut off, she climbed onto a filing cabinet, then leaped to another, playing the world's most dangerous game of floor is lava. Eventually, she made it to the back door, her orthopedic wedges somehow still on her feet despite the chaos. The last clear image shows her sprinting across the parking lot, her perfectly styled hair now resembling a bird's nest, her mouth open in what I can only assume was a continuous scream. Behind her, visible through the shattered glass doors, my herd was conducting the most thorough office renovation in HOA history. Karen tried to file charges the very next morning, showing up at the sheriff's office with grass stains on her pantsuit and a wild look in her eyes. She demanded my immediate arrest for terrorism, destruction of property, assault with a deadly weapon, and about 15 other charges she'd probably Googled on her phone. But I had come prepared with my own evidence, including security cam footage from my property showing HOA contractors trespassing and destroying private agricultural property without legal cause. The sheriff, Tom Morrison, had gone to high school with my father and had bought beef from our ranch for 30 years. He reviewed both sets of footage with the careful attention of a man who'd seen plenty of property disputes but nothing quite like this. After an hour of review, he leaned back in his chair and delivered his verdict with a straight face that must have taken years of practice to perfect. His response to Karen was simple and devastating. "You broke a rancher's fence and expected peace," he said with a shrug that suggested this outcome should have been obvious. "Ma'am, you removed a livestock barrier without authorization or proper permits. That's destruction of agricultural infrastructure, criminal trespassing, and reckless endangerment. The bison entering your office was a direct result of your illegal actions." Karen's face when the sheriff told her she was under investigation for destruction of livestock infrastructure was priceless. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound coming out for a full 10 seconds. When she finally found her voice, it came out as a shriek that probably scared every dog in a 3-block radius. She demanded to speak to his supervisor, apparently forgetting that in our small county, Tom was the senior officer. The legal aftermath was swift and merciless. Karen was fined by the county for unauthorized destruction of agricultural property, a hefty five-figure sum that made her face turn the color of an overripe tomato. I filed a civil suit for damages and trespassing, seeking compensation for the fence, lost grazing time, and emotional distress caused to my herd. Even the HOA's own insurance company got involved, and their investigation didn't go well for Karen. The insurance adjuster, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia who'd seen every scam in the book, took one look at the situation and immediately moved to drop the HOA from coverage. The official reason was gross negligence leading to what they termed hoof-based structural compromise. They sent Karen a bill for the damages that made the county fine look like pocket change. Between the fines, lawsuits, and insurance bills, Karen was looking at financial ruin. But I wasn't done yet. While Karen dealt with the legal fallout, I organized a BBQ fundraiser in what used to be the HOA parking lot. The banner read "Burgers for Boundaries: rebuild fences, not egos." Half the county showed up, including several Maplewood Hills residents who were secretly thrilled to see Karen taken down a peg. We raised enough money to build a new fence that could withstand a hurricane, with plenty left over for a legal defense fund. Chairman Moo became an overnight sensation when someone posted a video of him destroying the cardboard Karen. Within a week, he had his own TikTok account with 1 million followers. People started showing up at the ranch just to take selfies with the bull that took down an HOA. I even had to hire my nephew to manage his social media presence and merchandise sales. Who knew there was such a market for Chairman Moo t-shirts? The HOA board held an emergency meeting 2 weeks after the incident. The attendance was standing room only, with residents demanding Karen's immediate removal. The vote was unanimous, even from her former allies who realized association with her was political poison. When they announced the results, Karen stood up, pointed a shaking finger at the crowd, and declared this wasn't over. But it was. The final blow came when the State Agricultural Commission got involved. Turns out, destroying a rancher's fence isn't just a local matter when it involves livestock. They conducted their own investigation and found Karen personally liable for violating multiple agricultural protection statutes. The penalties included another massive fine and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. Karen's total financial obligation between fines, legal fees, and damages exceeded $200,000. When the final judgment was read in court, she collapsed into her chair and whispered the same word over and over again. "Impossible," she kept saying, as if denying reality would make it change. But the judge's gavel was final, and Karen Del Vecchio's reign of suburban terror was officially over.